In this video, we're going to talk about food cost percent, both calculating food cost percent and then using food cost percent to calculate other things. So food cost percent is a relationship between the menu item's cost and its selling price. So since you have that definition and you know from a previous video about the general percent formula, part over whole equals percent over 100, that we use to make the yield percent formula. Think about where each one of these things would end up in a formula for food cost percent. So where in that formula would food cost percent go? Where would the item's cost go? And where would selling price go? Think about that for a minute. Pause the video if you need to think about it. So this is the way that's going to get set up, because remember I told you when I originally told you about the part over whole equals percent over 100 formula, that what I like about that is you don't have to memorize things. They're intuitive. And so if you think about selling price and cost proportion, you know that cost proportion is going to be a part of the selling price. Otherwise you go bankrupt. So you want your cost proportion to be just a part of the selling price. Of course, the rest of it is your profit. And then the food cost percent goes over where the percent is. So if we have a thing like this where we know the cost proportion and we know what we want to sell the item for, and we want to calculate our food cost percent, we know we're going to use our general food cost percent formula. So when we do that, we're going to put the cost proportion here in the part, the estimated selling price in the whole, and then we'll calculate our food cost percent. So remember, when we use the percent formula, we multiply the two things that are diagonally across and then divide by the number that's left over, so that when we do this, we've used all three of these numbers. So this times this divided by that, and we do that and get 40%. So our food cost percent is 40%. So what that means is that the food costs 40% of what we sell it for. So in other words, we make a 60% profit on that item. So I'll caution you that if you're using a different way to do percent calculations, if you're not using the part over whole equals percent over 100, that the place you're most likely to run into trouble is when you're trying to calculate the selling price. So that's the place where I see people make a lot of mistakes. Okay, so if we had a cost proportion that we've gotten from costing out our recipe, getting the total recipe cost, dividing by the number of portions in the recipe, that gave us our cost proportion. And let's say that your restaurant is shooting for a food cost percent of 29%. So you're trying to hit that on all your food items. So that means you want to calculate an estimated selling price for this item. So we take our food cost percent formula, plug the cost proportion in where the part was, food cost percent over where the percent goes, and we're going to calculate our selling price. So we do this like that, and we get a selling price of $14.41. So another thing that can be handy to calculate is gross profit. So that's just money left over from the sale of a menu item after paying for ingredient costs. So if I sold 245 chicken chipotle sandwiches, and each sandwich sold for $8.50, if the food cost percent for the sandwich is 26%, what's your gross profit on this menu item? So I put it into the food cost percent formula, calculate my portion cost. So my portion cost is $2.21 per sandwich. I had 245 sandwiches I sold, so my total cost is $541. Those same 245 sandwiches at the 850 selling price made me 2,082.50 in revenue, and so my gross profit is $1,541.50.